and welcome to this edition of AWTC Presents Her Story, a series in which we profile our members from AWTC. I'm your host, Cecilia Sepp. I'm also a member of AWTC and currently volunteering on the marketing committee. Thanks for joining us. In this edition, we are profiling current AWTC board member and founding member, Gretchen Steenstra. Gretchen, welcome to Her Story. Would you like to say hello to the audience and tell us a little about yourself?
Yes, we have talked about Her Story as being such an important component of AWTC, but actually finding the time to do it is something that you were really insistent on, and I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for that. So can you tell the audience, Gretchen, what organization are you currently working at and what do you do there?
I currently work for Delcor, and Delcor is a consulting company that only works for nonprofits and associations, plan and execute IT. And so I personally do a lot of CIO work and really complicated AMS selections, but Delcor also is a full MSP. So we kind of help associations with their whole tech stack.
That's amazing. And I love that term tech stack. I just learned that a couple of years ago,
Yeah.
so I use it whenever I can. So
Yeah.
how did you get involved working with associations?
So I am like 99% of our colleagues, which is it was a happy accident that I moved to DC out of college. In that time in my life, I didn't know what to do. I was working with a placement agency and she placed me with my first association, and I was an assistant to the Chief Tax Counsel of Tax Executives, an association for corporate tax.
That's amazing. And you're right. We all do kind of fall into it unexpectedly.
Yeah.
So you have a long career working with associations and consulting with associations. Can you tell us about a time where you felt really good about your work?
So I have been so fortunate that every boss I've ever had has seen the next step in my career before I saw it myself. And so that is unique. And it's been every single boss I've ever had. So my very first boss, personal computing was just coming out, like databases were just an idea. And I was his assistant. And he said, "You're the only person who's vaguely interested in this. I want you to order computers for the entire office and figure it out." Like, okay. And then he did the same thing, like websites were just coming online. So I was at the cutting edge of that tech when I was really early in my career. And so I'm proud of myself for not running away from that opportunity and actually figuring it out. I'm also really proud of the boss that I had for seeing it and really just opening the door and shoving me through it.
What a great story. Just
Yeah.
figure it out. I love that. I had a
And that's been
boss.
everything. So then, as I moved up to different association sizes, I always had bosses who would say that to me, like, "You have the raw materials. Here's a problem we're trying to solve. Here's some guidelines, and I'm empowering you to make these decisions." And so it was very difficult. And when I worked at Optica, it was a scientific society. I didn't really understand how precise language was for researchers. And so I was very excited about a technology project. I was talking to the board. I talked about testing, and they went into scientific testing mode and started saying, "Oh, what methodology are you using in your testing?" And my boss was like, "No, no, 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 no."
Now they kind of testing. I
Yeah.
love.
But one of the things that I didn't know that I was good at until somebody, again, this is a pattern, is I'm really proud that I can hear what a business needs. I understand the language of what the technical people are saying, and I think I'm a really good bridge. And I felt like that was a skill that everybody had. And over time, I found out there were very few of us who can do that interpretive dance between what people say they want, but they didn't really articulate it properly, and how the developers or technical team interpret it. And the in between is where people have a lot of tension.
Mhm. And that's where the work begins,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And the in between.
Mm-hmm.
That's great background. And you're right, not everybody has that skill.
Mm-hmm.
So When you look back at this journey, which sounds like really incredible, all the different opportunities you've had. So, what advice helped you in your journey as a woman in tech?
So there are many. Um, and we'll talk about AWTC in a minute. One of the things that I really appreciate the CEO of Delcor, Loretta DeLuca, is I've worked with her for years. And every year you go through your goals of the year and you say, what do you want to work on? What do you want to strengthen? And there are things that I'm terrible at, like math and just very detailed financial statements and those types of calculations. It just does not work in my brain. But
Mhm.
every year I would take business classes and I would tell Loretta, I want to get better at this. Like, I don't really understand the back end of accounting and that language. I understand it as a basic layperson, but I want to know more about it. So I put it on my review every year.
Mhm.
And then one year she said, why do you keep putting this on your review as a goal? And I said, because I'm not good at it and I want to get better at it. And she said, I hired you because you are an A in these four areas, and that I want you to be an A or an A plus and take care of those talents that you have. Get rid of this. This is
Mhm.
something that you're never going to be good at. I didn't ask you to be good at it. So I need you to stop talking about it. And I really appreciated that advice. And so that is something that I talk to people about, and I have Moira Edwards does this. She has a personal retreat every year to kind of reflect and plan alone. And so if I'm really stuck, I ask myself that, is this something that you need to develop or do you need to drop it?
I think that's a great question. I'm a huge fan of introspection, so I'm glad that you
Yeah.
brought that up. That's true because we're not all good at everything.
Mm-mm.
So, but I am going to ask you to use one of the things you're really good at, which is looking ahead for
Right.
associations. So, where do you think technology is leading associations in the future?
Um, I think that we're on a journey and we're at another inflection point.
Mhm.
So, and this is consultant speak, this is what's in the news, but I really believe it that in the 90s, associations and had an entire wave of technology just that hit wave after wave after wave, and you just had to adapt. And we're in that time now. And so I think what's really important is that people continue to try things and be curious, but it is exhausting. And so I think the other thing in the future is we're just running at such high velocity
Right.
that taking breaks and figuring out what you're chasing, like, is it worth it? And I don't think people give themselves permission to say, I know this is the trendy hot technology for this industry, but it just doesn't fit me or what I'm doing or what I can do right now. And I can't. I have to be an observer.
Mhm.
But the velocity is just spinning up and spinning up. So I think people are just going to have to be better at curating what they are interested in, focusing on two or three things at a time and not getting overwhelmed.
That's excellent advice, especially for associations. Very
Mm-hmm.
easy for us to get distracted.
Yeah.
So, now you just mentioned AWTC, and we're going to
Mm-hmm.
talk about them a little bit. So, what do you like best about AWTC?
This is an amazing experiment that every year I'm surprised about the direction that people like you and other volunteers take AWTC. This started about 10 years ago as a meetup where we said, we want to have a conversation with developers and subject matter experts and consultants and just ask any question. Our first set of meetups were all around there is no dumb question, and you
Mhm.
don't have to feel afraid of looking stupid or vulnerable. That's where we started. And those conversations had a winding path. And then 4 years ago, when we made ourselves an official nonprofit, we the T of AWTC, technology, was the strongest letter. And we were really, really focused on building women's technology skills so they felt more confident. And over time, the A is bigger. that it's the association and getting people together. And the boards, we struggle with this sometimes, that we say we really have to figure out how to give women the technology skills and strength to close the gap where only around 20% of IT leadership jobs are with women. And so what I've learned about our experimental AWTC is it's networking, and it is literally like sponsoring each other, not mentoring, but truly sponsoring and investing each other. That's the secret sauce of AWTC. And I love it. And in this stage of my career, I still have many years to work. I am heavily focused on investing in individuals and their success and sponsoring them, not financially, but if there's something that you're trying to do and I can connect you to a resource and do a 5-minute favor to get you there, I'm going to do it.
Mhm.
Or if it's a year and you're like, I'm just having a tough year and I need a buddy that I trust to just ride along with me, I'm going to do it. And I think that flexibility at AWTC is amazing. Moira created small groups because people said, I need that structure of a facilitator to help me learn. And that was an experiment, and we're doing it again.
Mhm.
Chicago is taking off. I think it's next Wednesday. Michelle Warbalewski and a group of 25 women in Chicago, they meet quarterly for a roundtable. They just met at an AWTC event, said, we need to meet regularly in Chicago, and they did it. And so that spirit is what I just love about AWTC.
It is a great spirit. And I remember going to some of the meetups before the formal organization was created, and always got a lot out of them. And I love the spirit too that you just described. It's wonderful. So I think you've already answered my closing question, but I'll pose it anyway. Why should someone join AWTC and get involved?
You don't have to. And so that's a join is a word that we have struggled with at AWTC. So when we first started, we said, if you show up, you're a member, you're part of our community. We have zero boundaries.
Mhm.
And if you're an association champion, it's not gender based. The women in AWTC is about, again, closing that statistical gap
Mhm.
of women in technology leadership roles. But everyone can be a champion of technology and support that mission. And so we didn't want to put a membership barrier up, but people didn't feel that sense of belonging without filling out a form
Mhm.
and committing, which I think is very interesting human behavior,
Mhm.
where people said to AWTC, I don't want to have the overhead of an application or paying dues or some of the typical things that membership organizations have. And then they said, but I'm not really sure how I belong. And so we said, well, you either fill out a form or tell us, like, we need to know. And so at AWTC, if you participate, you are a member. If you need to fill out a form, we have a form on our website that you can give us your contact information so it's easier to reach you, for us to reach you, and you can pay whatever you can to support the organization. If you work for a company like Delcor or Rogue Tulip, you can be a sponsor and help that way. There's just a lot of ways available, and we want to keep it that way. That one of the things that we've learned about AWTC is nonprofits and associations have a structure to support a community and their mission.
Mhm.
But there's also some old habits that have been around forever, and they're just habits. And so the other thing that I think is refreshing about being part of AWTC is we're constantly challenging, is that a good habit that we should pick up and nurture at AWTC, or is that just a habit for habit's sake and we shouldn't do it? And so, so that's why I think people should be a member of this group. It just gives you a totally different perspective. It's people you don't normally run across. AWTC has wide opportunities for people to meet, like social networking happy hours. And then we have really small, intimate experiences. that just support people. So lots of cliches, but they're true.
They are true.
Mm.
And I do appreciate that AWTC is having a 21st century membership model as opposed to all those old habits. I'm glad you
Mhm.
pointed that out.
Right. And I just feel like, Cecilia, there have been so many small moments that just like right now, like thinking about it, I physically have chills. And one of those small moments is with you. Um, that last year we had our first conference, AWTC Advance, which was 100 people, and it was a half-day program. And we were talking about your professional career, we were talking about AI, we were talking about data, and we're all volunteers. We have no paid staff. And we put this meeting together and we thought we had it covered. And then when we were trying to transition people from one, we were talking about your professional roadmap and then we were moving over to AI. It was a little chaotic. And you came over to me and you said, I think I can lead these people around. And I said, oh, sure, sure. And so you created this cohort and they stayed with you all day and they just
Mhm.
followed you. And so again, there was like a gap. No, there was no blaming, no running around. What are we going to do? You're like, I got it. And I said, do you need anything from me? And you're like, nope. And I think that is what is amazing about this group. It just gives you that opportunity. And then this year in advance, you had a group of people and you were talking about a topic and it got so deep so fast. Your group stayed together and we were having lunch and we were working around your group. And they're like,
It was,
Gretchen,
yeah.
you're bugging us?
It was a very in-depth
Hmm.
conversation. And again, that's another benefit of AWTC
Right.
is being able to dig into things. And that whole conversation started because at first nobody was saying anything. And I
Really?
posed the question, does everybody hate AI as much as I do?
Of
Boom, there
course
goes
you
the
do.
conversation. And it actually turned into a really great conversation about the uses, the tools, and the policies that we use and then help our members use. So
Yeah.
that is the power of
Yeah.
AWTC.
Yeah. And then the very next day, Michelle Warbileski was at AWTC and she was again doing a facilitated session. And she's like, I'm not really sure how to do this, but I'll figure it out. And she did an amazing job. And the next day, she was at the holiday showcase in Chicago,
Mhm.
and a speaker didn't show up, and nobody knew what was happening. And so they had a room full of people, and everyone was just sitting around waiting for the speaker to come, and something happened. And so Michelle's like, well, I was at AWTC yesterday and we did this facilitated session where we did a panel and we asked these questions, and I think that would fit. So I'm gonna do it.
Excellent.
And she grabbed the mic and stood in front of the room and said, you three people, come join me on this panel. And she said, I would not have been able to do it unless I had practiced that with my group and built that, confidence in myself that I
Mhm.
could do it. So those are the things that just make me so happy. And I'm so proud of it.
And you should be. This has been a great conversation, Gretchen, and a wonderful snapshot into you. So thank you so much for
You're
joining me for
welcome.
her story.
All right. Well, thanks for being an amazing host.
Oh, well, thank you for that. So,
Mhm.
well, as you can tell, Gretchen and I are huge fans of AWTC and hope to be participating in it for many years to come. If
Yes.
you'd like to learn more about AWTC, go to our website, awtc.tech, visit our events page. We have events all year long, from advance in person to webinars to in persons in Chicago and maybe everywhere in between. So keep your eye on our events page. You can fill out our membership form there, and you can watch our other editions of HERstory and learn more about all the fantastic people in this organization. So thanks for joining us for this episode of HERstory presented by AWTC, and we will see you next time.